Anyway, please welcome Tony.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited and honored to be the moderator for this great panel. Now, before we start, I want you all to follow along with me. I'm going to say the word why, W-H-Y. And your response is because kindness matters. Can we try that? Why? Because kindness matters. Why? Because kindness matters. Why? Because kindness matters. So remember, as we think about doing more good, there is a 100% connection between doing more good, taking care of our communities, taking care of our employees, taking care of our customers, and profitability. To that extent, let's get the panel started. Okay, so I'll ask a few questions, and I invite everyone in the audience to ask questions. You have an esteemed panel here. You have really the experts in the Nebraska area around doing more good. And my first question is, why is doing more good? Why is it mission critical? So why is it really, really important to your organizations? And what's the real return for a business? What's the real return? So you all may pass the mic down and speak as the Spirit may move you. Why is it mission critical?
Yeah, now nobody wants to. I just volunteered to bring the mic down. I didn't realize it would require me to speak first. I think that why it's mission critical is different probably to each one of us. One of the things I always say is the best thing about owning your own company is you can do whatever the hell you want when you own the company. And this is just what Tammy and I have decided we want to do. We decided this is the impact we wanted to make in our life. We wanted to use that incredible resource for more than just building our own bank account. And the return on it, there's lots of ways you can answer that. But what I can tell you, the return for me is that I love going to work every day, and I love trying to figure out how to make more money and get more customers. And it's not because I know that will lead to more personal financial success, but I know it means that we can do more good. And that's to have that opportunity to be motivated by that every day is a return that you can't get any other way.
Tony, I would just comment. Some of you might remember the great economist Milton Friedman. Unfortunately, he had one idea that got proliferated that I think was very wrong-headed. And some of you might recall, I think it was in the 70s, he once said that the sole purpose of business is to generate profits and to return on equity. And I think as a result of that, we've had a lot of bad things happen in our economic system. Environmental degradation, exploitation of women, racial bias. A lot of bad things happen because of that particular attitude. And I think it was epitomized. Everybody remember the movie Wall Street? And there was a line in there, greed is good. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Today, collectively, as a society, we're not going to do business with those kinds of organizations. I mean, they might get away with it for a while, but not long term. People are not going to come to work for those types of organizations. So, to me, you can even do it from a selfish standpoint. If you want to be successful, you better be about more than just the bottom line. You better be about how you can help society, how you can help your associates, and of course, how you can do best by your customers.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll add in a little bit on that. I think it's interesting that the founder of conscious capitalism, and you're going to hear more about conscious capitalism tomorrow, but there's a gentleman named John Mackey who's the founder of Whole Foods, who was a student of Milton Friedman and debated him in a classroom after he made that famous statement that business should be all about profit. That's the sole purpose of a business. And in later years, Professor Friedman recanted a bit on his position on that, which was a good thing to do. But one thing that conscious capitalists believe, and you're going to, again, hear more about this tomorrow, is that profit and purpose are inextricably linked. There is no way in today's world that a business can operate in a way that is harmful to the environment, or in a way that they don't give back, where it's all motivated solely by greed, whether it's Gordon Gekko or anyone else who says that. There's no way a company in 2019 will survive doing that. We live in glass houses. There's literally a website called Glassdoor where anybody can log into and say anything they want without fear of retribution. The company can't respond or say anything back other than add stuff to it. It's a different world today than it was even 3 or 4 years ago, not to mention 30 or 40 years ago. It's a different world. And there is no option but to be transparent, open, honest, and good about your intent, because companies that don't follow that simply won't be around in another 5, 10 years. I believe that sincerely.
I was having a conversation with my business partner, Reed, who's back here, and we were talking about how when a person becomes the center of their own universe, how their life is over. Like, that's how I feel. If everything is all about me and I am the goal, my satisfaction, everything is just centered on me, then my life is over. And the quality of a person's life ought to be measured in the way of the impact that it has and the amount of people that you help. And so I think a common denominator among all of us here is that we see that this is fuel. Tapping into something bigger is fuel for us to be able to grow business and do things that we wouldn't be able to do by ourselves. And it brings people into the fold that creates a camaraderie, creates kind of a rally, a team aspect to it.
I want to say that I wish I could say that everything that we do is super altruistic and it's just for the good, but in the liquor industry, there is a lot of repetition. You do a lot of the same things every day. You have the paperwork, and it's hard to get excited for another new flavor of Crown Royal every week. So being involved in doing good for the community, it's a good change up too. And I mean, it helps keep things fresh. It helps keep everybody on their toes. Something new's happening this week. Let's look at a new nonprofit that we can help out. It's good to be more than just what you do in your narrow job description. And I think doing more good helps you do that.
Anyone else? Any questions from the audience? Questions from the audience? Over here.
Tony,
It's my friend Lowell.
thank you. I'm wondering if, Tom, your comments about the bad things that resulted from the economic principle that profit is the only good, this new model suggests that other things have good too, and are required to be pursued by a company if you're a benefit corporation. Does that reality put less pressure on companies to maximize short-term profits over long-range profitability? The mantra of the pressure and paranoia of short-term gains has been a problem in capitalism for decades.
Yeah.
Does this relieve part of that pressure?
I think it helps. And it depends on the structure of the company. Now, our company, we're fortunate in that we're privately held. We're owned by our policyholders. And so we don't have the pressure of having to have performance quarter by quarter. But I'm on the board of 2 publicly traded companies, and I understand that pressure every quarter. But I also would say, even in the case of publicly traded companies, and Berkshire Hathaway is a great example of this, you end up attracting the kind of shareholders that you deserve. And if you preach the fact that, hey, it's just going to be about the next quarter results, you're going to attract shareholders like that. You look at Berkshire Hathaway, Warren, he does never focus on the quarter by quarter results. I mean, he focuses very long term, and his shareholder base reflects that. I mean, most of Berkshire shareholders have been shareholders for many, many years.
Yes.
Could you guys talk about some of those push-through moments? You know, from idea to you get some momentum, and with any project, you kind of hit those sticking points, and with anything, those are the moments that you would make or break, and then you push through it to start seeing success. What are some of your guys' like moments that you had to kind of push through to start seeing the momentum?
So we all have these different cycles in our business, right? We've all been pushed to do what we're doing on some scale. Probably the 3 or 4 biggest kind of newer tech firms in Nebraska are Spreetail, Huddle, Buildertrend, and a company called Flywheel up in Omaha. What's happened because of kind of these moments is Huddle will do something, Spreetail reacts, Buildertrend reacts, Sojourn reacts, everybody reacts to it. I can guarantee you, and maybe this isn't fair, but Emeritus and a Surety probably wouldn't have volunteer time off if they weren't hearing about it at the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, it's part. I mean, you've been around a lot longer, but we're getting a lot of what's happening here. Kind of to Jay's comments, is this technology is driving kind of innovation and do more good. But to the moments for us, it was literally about 8 years into our business when we sat down with my 2 partners that we started the company, and we said, what's the most important part of our business? And is it profits? Is it our product? Because all we talk about, if you think about in your business most days, I sat in 3 meetings today. 2 of them were marketing related. One was like a kind of a mini board prep meeting. We didn't talk about people. I didn't talk about people until I got here today. So we started putting a focus at our company on how much time we spend talking about the people in our organization, the development of our people. And that has been the biggest battle we've had, both internally on execution, but also making it a priority outside of HR. Because if you think about your traditional business, people are, HR owns people. But the reality is all of our businesses are run by people. They should be the priority for every business in the world. And I think that's just starting to change in a lot of cultures today.
Yeah, and I that's a great question, and I think we have a little different angle. All of us have different ways that we do more good. I'm fortunate that my whole team that I supervise, that's our whole job, the community impact team at Spreetail. And so, push through moment for us is, let me ask a question first. So, who knows who Spreetail is in this room? Yeah, so I go to New York City and I ask that question, there's no hands. Or I go to Detroit, there's no hands. Or when I go to San Diego, there's no hands. And so a push through moment for us is showing other people that don't know who we are that we are genuine in what we're trying to do, because we truly are. We think through the projects we do, the programming. We're very intentional in the words we use and who we talk to. We ask a lot of questions when we're trying to do good in other communities. And so the push through moment for us is just establishing ourselves, taking a step back. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? Did we ask the right questions? And so constantly just making sure we're not a burden and we are really being truthful and helpful in what we're trying to do.
Anyone else? Just a logistics check. There are 2 mics in the center aisle, so if you'd like to ask a question, you can make your way to the center aisle and use the microphone. That way everyone in the auditorium can hear your question. Other questions from the audience? Okay.
Yeah, Tammy and Brandon talked a little bit about some of the internal metrics that the employee satisfaction. I'm curious to know what other internal but also external community evaluation and metrics you've been able to collect and learn from.
I can go first. We're not very good at that yet, so come ask me in a year or so. So yeah, I think it's really tough for us at this point to figure out what that looks like. We don't have a volunteer time off policy like Firespring. We do for us, my team lives on, the community impact team lives on the marketing team, and so we look at what communities we're building connections in. We're looking at, is our programming innovative enough that people are recognizing it? And so looking at, if we're getting, on media or PR or social media likes, things like that. So there's some things we do look at, but we are trying to get better at that. So.
And I would imagine that we would all say we're trying to get better at that because it's still, I think this whole data revolution is still early in its stages of growth, and it's an important change for us. We are in the process of determining all the things that we need and want to measure and why we need and want to measure those things. Because we manage what we measure, and we have to make sure we're measuring the right things because we're going to focus our time and attention in those directions. A few of the things that we do measure regularly, one of the most common is the Net Promoter Score, which is a national standard of asking your clients, whether or not they would recommend doing business with your company. We do the same thing internally as well. Once a quarter, we do an internal net engagement score to understand how engaged all of our team members are. And that metric is a really important metric for us. It's how we measure our success internally as to how we're doing. Because oftentimes, and it was talked about earlier, oftentimes there are leaders or managers of a company that are out doing amazing things. Brandon and Tammy talked about this. But yet the team members feel isolated or distant from it. They don't feel like they're part of it. And so we need to measure things that show and demonstrate how we can include every person in our organization. So we measure volunteer time. We measure all of the things internally about how people are giving back and what kind of causes our team members are connected to. So there are a lot of things you can measure.
Other questions?
See, this is the problem when you have a couple of married people here. You do it. No, you talk about it. So one thing for us in being a B Corp, we decided to do that because there was some accountability around having that certification. So every year, the state of Nebraska requires us to file an annual benefit report to say what we have done in that arena. And for us, that has been a really nice way to reflect back and sort of bring all of that together. We are bad data collectors. I'm more about someone telling me a story about how something impacted them than counting up numbers of things. But the benefit report and having to go through the B Corp certification process every 3 years is a nice way to check in and give yourself a progress report. So.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yay. Yes. Many of you are B Corps, right? So you're already making a financial impact back into the community. But I'm curious, Chad, maybe specifically for Spreetail, do you try to engage your employees to philanthropically give back as well beyond their time? I think that's very, very important for next generation leaders to think about their financial commitment back to the communities they reside.
Yeah, we have a donation matching program that we have. So, and this was started before the 5% movement. So if you've been at Spreetail for a year to 3 years, you have a $250 donation match. 3 to 5 years is $500, and over 5 years, it's $1,000. So that's been in place for several years. So when we say giving's in our DNA, I use that as an example because that's been around for a while.
We have that at DACOS too, just charitable matching. And just in the last year even, that amount that we've matched has doubled. So I think it's just a natural outcome of trying to do more good and engaging more people in that process. To me, that's naturally will follow having opportunities to see the impact. So I think a charitable matching program is a nice indicator of how that's going.
Other responses? Okay.
Okay. So again, that's the problem. The only thing I would sort of say to that is I think it's really important that we remember that it's important to meet people where they are. And we think about that a lot with our employees is, I was fortunate. I grew up in a home where being involved philanthropically in community was very important. It was just part of it was the expectation set. But not everybody comes from that. And we don't ever want someone to feel pressured or uncomfortable to do things. We want them to feel inspired to do them. And we try to figure out how to inspire them, not how to make them feel like this is an obligation. And we've really struggled even like trying to figure out with hiring. One of the questions we have is, we bring people into the organization. This is an important part of who we are. So we ask them about, not necessarily their philanthropic giving, but volunteer work. And we had a conversation at our company one time about should we eliminate people who don't volunteer? Should we not consider them for employment? Because if this is who we are, don't we want people who are inspired to give back coming here? And we had a woman stand up, and she's been with us quite a few years, and she said, hey, I just want you to know, before I came to work here, I wasn't involved in the community at all. I had no volunteer time because I never had an opportunity to. And now she is on community boards. She is involved in all sorts of activities in the community, giving back. And she said, don't shut the door on people. Let them come into this environment, inspire them, and then you'll see that build over time. So just that little addition to it.
Any additional responses? Okay. Question.
Mine is for Jamie, and I was just wondering how you financially planned for putting solar panels up, because like it's really great that you can do something with that money afterward, but how did you get there as like a small business?
Right. That took a couple years. So after we built the new store, for several years we built up our cash fund because I kind of had this in mind. We talked to our accountant a lot about the solar tax laws, and we really dug into how much we could save on our bill every month. And it turned out that the price tag for the panels was about $80,000. After tax credits, it got down to about $40,000. And then every year we've saved about half of what we've been paying before. So we'd been doing about $20,000 a year, maybe a little less than that, 15 to 20 a year getting it back. So we really budgeted out a lot because, I mean, that's a big chunk of change for such a small store. But it's something with the amount of electricity we're using, we could swing that. If we were someone else who didn't have a big cooler that was using a bunch of electricity and high ceilings where you have to air condition a lot, it might have been a little tougher because it would have been harder to justify, but it worked for us. Thank you.
Other questions? I've got a question for the panel. You know, conceptually, doing more good sounds great, but how do you operationalize it? Like, what are the 3 to 5 things that you would prioritize in anyone's effort in starting a doing more good initiative? Top 3 to 5 priorities.
It's a great question. We made a ton of mistakes on this. The first one is there was no accountability and organization for it. And so after we realized we set up VTO years ago, I asked, it was kind of the reporting mechanism, like, okay, who's using it, where are they going, and there was really no accountability there. The VTO is a great thing if you can manage it, if you know what people are doing, and you can share the good news internally. So for me, it's about accountability, and what we did is we basically set up an internal committee. It's called BT Cares. That committee is responsible to the executive team. Nobody on the executive team is on that committee. So we have a set budget that we allot every year basically to the community that we're going to donate and that we'll match through. But at the end of the day, I'm not making that decision. Sure. So whether it's an entry-level employee, and it's kind of a great way to get everybody from all different departments to work together. But that was something we didn't do until we realized we didn't know what the hell was going on.
Sure.
So, I would say number one thing is figure out what you want to focus on. So we have our 3 focus areas that I mentioned. It allows us to say no, which you have to. If you want to create a program where you are doing more good, figure out where you want to do more good. If you look at us, we all have different areas that we focus on, but you have to have the ability to say no and focus on certain areas.
I want to echo that. For a while, we were pretty scattershot in what we did for the community. We'd see something here and we'd throw a few bucks that way or go volunteer somewhere for one day, and then we were out. Once we decided that we wanted to really drill in on the environment and environmental causes, that enabled us to, like Chad said, say no to other things and give more to the things we really cared about and that we're passionate about.
Anyone else? Okay, question.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your stories today. My question is, if you would, you're kind of already starting to talk about this, but would you share the mistakes that you've made or the experiments that you've made that you would not make again or you would not recommend we make?
Don't just do something because Huddle's doing it.
That's pretty good.
Anybody from Huddle here? David Graff, are you here?
That's pretty good.
I would just say, of course, we've made no mistakes, but no, I'm kidding. I would say, I think one thing that has been helpful for us was approaching it from the mindset of an experiment, like you mentioned, and that it's okay to make mistakes because in the end, we're certainly doing more good than we were doing before. So if we don't get it exactly right away, I think that's a great chance to learn and evolve and grow in that process because for me, especially, part of the whole reason to do any of this is that everyone learns a little bit about the importance of community engagement and giving back and participation. And sometimes, for me especially, the best way to learn is to make a mistake or to fail. So don't be afraid of having it all figured out right away, because I think there is something wonderful that happens in the journey. And if you give yourself permission to screw it up a little bit and then try again, I think you'll get a lot further and you'll feel a lot better about what you're doing. So
I think one thing is to always make a plan, whether or not it's a bulletproof plan or it's just a couple of sentences on a piece of paper. We were in a situation recently where we almost overcommitted ourselves to something that we didn't really put a plan towards. And once we stepped back and saw that it wasn't going to be executed the way that we really wanted it to, we were able to pull back, one, because we didn't commit to it, but had we taken the time to actually put a plan together, we would have realized a lot sooner that it wasn't the right fit for us.
Yeah, and I will add to this that we were the poster children for making mistakes for a long time. There were so many things that we didn't execute on. It sounded great in theory, but didn't really work so well. And the key to anything, and kind of building on what Dan said, you can't just build a copycat culture that you pick things from what other people have done. I'm a huge believer in the concept of R&D, which stands for rip off and duplicate, to taking other people's ideas. But you have to iterate on those and evolve them and make them your own. You can't just plug and play, and you have to do a lot of soul checking to make sure that what you're implementing is truly core for your company and not just because someone else tried it or did it. And most of the mistakes that we've made have been because of that, because we heard about it, thought it was a great idea, and just kind of rushed to implement and didn't take the time necessary to think about it. But the most important thing around the concept of just making mistakes is just being vulnerable in the response of what happens if you're not doing well. It's horrible. It's a huge mistake, and we've done this in the past too. But I personally have gotten a lot better at just standing in front of people as a leader and saying, look, sorry, we screwed that up. It didn't go the way we thought it would. We didn't think about it enough. Instead of trying to be stoic and sweep things under the rug and pretend it didn't happen, that's the way to kill a culture. But you can build a great culture if you're just willing to admit that you haven't executed on something right. I think that's the most important part of mistakes.
And I would just sort of echo that and add to that again, I know that sort of our role here is to promote this, but I'm going to share this piece. It's kind of hard. I mean, it's really rewarding, but it is kind of hard because if I'm running my business for only profit reasons, I can make that judgment really easily, right? I can look at my financial reports and determine whether this is a good move or not a good move. When you exist to do good and be good, what does that mean for a company? And we've been on that journey for 3 or 4 years trying to figure out what that means. I always said it'd be a lot easier if there were sort of these little good tokens that you could measure. And if you did this, you'd get so many good tokens that only cost you this. But those don't exist. So you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's going to be a journey to figure out what it is and just know that going in. But it is incredibly rewarding.
I would say in addition to what my fellow panelists have commented on, we're probably the oldest company up here. We've been around forever. And one of the problems with that, there's a lot of good things with that, is you get certain things that you do that were really great reasons to do it, initially, and then they become kind of institutionalized and become bureaucratic. And so you keep doing them, and we're really not remembering why. And a great example for us is we have always been a strong supporter of United Way, and want to continue to be a strong supporter of United Way. But the whole process can become kind of bureaucratic, and you forget about all the good that United Way does.
I think in my experience, an easy way that I got tripped up over this is maybe rushing into it too fast, not having a big enough plan in place, business-wise, and so letting your passion and your heart get ahead of you, and not drawing things out and creating a nice strategic plan for it. And so you kind of just get excited about it, and it's like, we're going to do this, and then you start going after it, and then not everyone knows what's going on, and everyone's not on the same page. And then we want it to be sustainable too, right? It's not just going to be a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing. We want this to be something that lasts for a long time. And so how do we make sure that the economics work and that it can continue to build on itself?
I think one of the mistakes that I'm probably in the process of doing right now is not telling our story effectively of what we are trying to accomplish. Because you can make that step to do more good, but ultimately what I think, at least I'm looking for, is to make it a multiplier where our customers, our employees, our community sees that too, and they jump in and help, or at least are aware of what is going on. And for me, for a small store, it's really hard to get that story out there so everybody knows it. So that's something that we're going to work on and that we need to do better.
Thank you. Tanya.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Oh, that's really loud. We've been talking a lot about giving back to the community, volunteering, working with nonprofits. We've talked a little bit about impact on environment. Would y'all share some other examples of things you've done or are thinking about doing that involve doing more good that is beyond volunteering and nonprofits and environment?
I can give one example, a great example. Mike Rankins here with NeighborWorks, and I'm really proud of this, but we partnered with NeighborWorks to construct affordable housing in downtown Lincoln. And so this was not eleemosynary. That wasn't our total motivation. I mean, the motivation was we were going to make money as well. But we also we accomplished several things. One, we helped an area that was a blighted area look better. Selfish reason, we protected an area around the Assurity Center so it looks nice. But we also provided great new affordable housing for a lot of people in an area. So that's an example of, kind of a triple or quadruple win.
That's a huge win. We spend a lot of time focused on our team. So we've got a 4-day work week for about a third of our staff, which means a third of the people that work our company either have Monday or Friday off. You can't get time back in life. That's a huge opportunity. We don't expect anybody, I think Jay said this earlier, we don't expect anybody to work more than 40 hours a week. And then we have about $1 million budget on family and fun activities for our team of 500. And that goes into everything from picnics, food, to sponsoring the Maha Music Festival, to doing life skills classes for our young college grads, how to change a tire, how to rent an apartment, how to buy a car. We have one of those once a week, how to cook in your apartment without setting it on fire. So when we think about do more good, I mean, that doesn't really compare to affordable housing, but if we can get someone over the hump to rent their first apartment, we feel like we won the day. So that's one thing we're doing.
So one of the things, when we talk about our efforts, we divide it sort of evenly between investing in the community, investing in our employees, and we're dedicating resources to that as well. But I think even beyond that, one of the things that the further we get into it, the more we realize that if you're really going to be a business that is a force for good, it has to go beyond what checks you write or what volunteer time you write or you give. Because if you're a business where your employees come to work and they're miserable and they work all these hours and they go home at the end of the day and they're, not able to be good parents to their kids and good spouses because they're exhausted and frustrated from work, there's no check big enough you can write to negate the impact of that. So for us, it's, are we in our efforts to be good, being good not just externally but internally in everything that we do? And so one of the things that we did, a mistake we've made in sort of our culture of our company is we were always a company who, because of our unusual nature of our business, we would hire a lot of people and a lot of people wouldn't make it because it's not an easy job and it's not something everyone gets. And so consequently, we fired a lot of people. And we always justified it as, hey, we're doing them a favor because they're not going to make it. It's not fair to keep them there. And it's a hard position to hire, and so we fire them. And I sort of had this revelation as we went down this road. Yeah, you can't be a business that is making a positive impact in the world if your employees come to work and always are fearful for their jobs. So I had one of those moments where I stood up in front of the company and I'm like, we have screwed this up royally and we are committed to change. And we had to change a bunch of stuff because that means if you're not going to fire people, except in extreme circumstances, you better get good at hiring, for example, because you don't want to bring someone in. But to me, again, that's the kind of stuff that we talked about, this journey. That's the journey that this goes in. You go in, you start with one thing and you think it's this thing, and the further you get into it, the more you realize in order to really do good and be good, you have to be all in. You have to be 100% in everything you do. If that's your goal, how you treat your employees, how you treat your customers, not to mention how you treat the community.
Yeah. Tanya, I don't know if this answers your question or not, but one of the things that we've done to invest in our people is we've developed this Mind, Body, Soul program. So that way people will look for ways to invest in their personal development, professional development, or their physical health or their spiritual health, and we incentivize that. So as a way to help them grow and to have incentives to pursue that and make that a priority, it's something that we've done that we've seen clients, or not clients, but employees really dig into and try new things they haven't done before.
And one of the things we're working on in relation to this, we have a lot of work yet to do. We have this thing called Firespring University, only because it says FU and it fits our culture. And it's a way for our team to have personal and professional development that goes beyond, the training on how to do your job. It's stuff that affects their personal life. But one of the things that we're really thinking about is this ripple effect of how can we help our team members be better parents? How can we help them create forces for good in our community and to impact their family? We recently had Parents' Day at Firespring, and we had more than 60 parents come in and spend all morning. It was hilarious. The photos that ended up on Instagram were amazing. But extending the impact that we make from our team to their families and to their extended communities is something we're thinking about now as to how to make that more proactive.
We agree with that. At Spreetel, part of our culture is building deep personal relationships, and so much of that goes into just the work that we put forward every day, because we know that at startups, these jobs are really hard and we're moving really fast, and we want to ensure that the people around us know that we have each other's backs. So we spend a lot of time together talking about things that are outside of work and just really getting to know each other so that we can do this together, because we can't do it if we're not connected that personally.
That's great. Question from Senator Patty Panzine Brooks.
Thank you.
The great state of Nebraska.
Thank you, Tony. So, number one, I'm so grateful you're all here and proud of the amazing work you're doing in our community and across the state. I'm interested from a legal standpoint. The Benefit Corporation Act passed in 2014, and there are 7 benefit corporations in Nebraska. Why is that? Why are there not more? A couple things. Not only is it, is it complicated? Is it too complicated? Do you think people need additional legislation? Is it conferences like this that will allow people to understand what's going on and say, hey, me too? What is it that's causing that only 7 of you?
Thank you for asking that question. I have a question for the audience. How many people here know what a benefit corporation is? And how many people here that raised your hand could clearly articulate the difference between a benefit corporation and a B Corp? There's a couple of hands that went up. That's the problem right there. The problem is education and making people aware of what a benefit corporation is. Most people do not know that a benefit corporation is something that any company can become simply by changing their bylaws and registering with the state of Nebraska or whatever state they're incorporated in, that it doesn't change your tax status. It doesn't change you from a C Corp, an S Corp, or an LLC, however you're organized as a tax organization. It only affects the internal bylaws, and you're making a pledge that as a benefit corporation in the state of Nebraska or whatever state they're in, the pledge is that when matters come before the board of directors, the decision makers in that entity, that they will take into consideration the environmental and social impact of their decisions. That's essentially all it means to become a benefit corporation and then to file an annual report. As Tammy was talking about earlier, it's not difficult, but people don't even know that it's an option. They're confused and they think that you have to go through certification with B Labs, which is a nonprofit based in Philadelphia that certifies B Corps. They're totally different things. They're related, but they're totally different things. There's a lot more education coming on this topic tomorrow. If you're here tomorrow throughout the day, by the end of the day, you're going to know everything you need to know about the differences between benefit corporations and B Corps, and you'll know why you would want to pursue one over the other.
So to just pick up on what Jay said, Senator, so we have a little bit of a unique situation, but there's more entities like us. And I don't remember the percentage of the shareholders or the owners of the company that have to vote in favor of becoming a benefit corporation. I don't remember. But that was the problem. So in the case of a surety, pardon? Two-thirds, okay. So in the case of a surety, we are a certified B Corp, but we're not a benefit corporation. And we didn't become a benefit corporation because we would never be able to get 2/3 of our policyholders to vote. I mean, when we send out proxies, we're lucky if we get 20%.
Yeah.
And typically we get around 15%. And so we just knew from the start that was a non-starter. I mean, we just can't get them to vote.
We didn't know anything about it. I knew very little about it. In fact, I Googled it on my way here today. I don't know where you stand on one side of the aisle, but I'd say if you added that tax advantage bill, a lot more people would know about it. It might be a little late in the game for that, but it's complete awareness. I mean, if you go through that tax advantage bill, Nebraska Advantage, which we took advantage of, and it was very good for our business. If that was something that was in front of a small business that was easy to understand, I can guarantee you there'd be a lot more than 7 or 8 in the state of Nebraska.
That's a great point. Other responses? Question.
Yes, thank you all for being here. My question involves in business, as you grow, if you're considered a startup, year over year, you have to scale to grow larger. How do you scale doing more good as you grow larger as a business?
It's a great question. Great question. Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll start there because we're growing like crazy. And, part of it is really committing to what we're doing here. So we're growing. Spreetel.com is a new site. It's been up for about 45 days, and we've probably had 45 conversations on whether or not 5% is the right thing to do. But my CEO, Brett, is committed. I'm committed to this, and it just becomes a value proposition that we've just decided to take off the table completely. Not saying our finance guy won't bring it up in 6 more months, but you really just have to commit to what it is is that you're doing. And as long as you stay committed and your team is committed and you're continually making great progress, which we are, and when our team sees that, they're very excited about what we're doing, that just gives you the momentum to just keep it going.
Other responses?
I talk to a lot of startups, and this answer may not be very politically correct at the Do More Good conference, but depending on what you're doing in a startup environment, you really need to focus on getting kind of from point A to point B to point C to point D. You can't do everything. You can do more good, I think, on the impact you make on your team, and the way you treat your team in that moment of holy cow, what's going to happen tomorrow, the impact you can make on their lives. I would say get through the really hard part in your startup. And once you become a little bit more established, you have more time, you have more talent, you have more dollars, quite honestly, then really put a focus on, all right, now we've got a foundation laid. We know we're going to be in business. Now let's talk about the impact we can make beyond these walls that we're in.
Other responses? Well, I think we are out of time, but let me say this in closing before I turn it back over to Marty. I think as we think about this Do More Good conference, Nebraska has a challenge, and that challenge really centers around being able to attract talent and retain talent here in the state. There's a movement out there called Blueprint Nebraska. And Blueprint Nebraska, we continue to talk about how do we get people to come here? How do we grow our economic base so that we can do something about taxes, because that is spread out. What I will say is that Do More Good, this conference has an economic development impact, because all of a sudden, people around the world will start to see this conference, and we will no longer be just a flyover state. This will be the central point of the Do More Good, and from an economic development standpoint, we can attract talent, we can retain talent, we can do good in this community, and we can impact the world. Let's give this panel a hand.